This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up, Laura Capper, founder and CEO of Cap Resources, talking about the ever-increasing challenges of water in the oil and gas space. Next up, Cindy Boyd, CEO of CBM Enterprise Solutions, talking about their new equipment to better monitor petrochemical equipment. All that right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Laura Capper, founder and CEO of Cap Resources. Laura, great to have you back on the program.
Great to see you again, Paul. Thank you.
Well, and fill us in on, it's been a while since you've been on, and there have been some changes in the oil and gas space as it relates to water.
And
What's been
I am
happening?
so happy to say there have been some favorable changes in the market since we spoke last.
Tell us.
Around a year or so ago. Well, so my team works on this annual update. We do a report on kind of the state of water and oil and gas. So there have been 2 or 3 areas we've been focused on this last round. And the first is kind of a new concept called water management. So you probably remember when I was here last, I was kind of beating the drum on water treatment.
Sure.
Now it's become kind of more holistic, more kind of a cradle-to-grave approach. What are we doing with water? You know, you hate to make an enemy in these types of markets, but if there were an enemy, it's probably trucking.
Is that right?
And that we need all this water. How do you get all that water around?
Is it the cost? Or?
Well, you've probably heard, so a frac job uses a fair amount of water.
Sure.
And if you move that around in trucks, there are literally hundreds of trucks worth of water for every frac job. So industry has been focused for quite a while on how do we cut down on that trucking traffic. It's always cost. In any industry, it's always cost. But, you know, emissions, tearing up roadways, some of these little towns, trucks barreling through, you just don't want that. So I think the good news is the industry has made inroads kind of replacing trucking with another way of getting water around. So that's probably top of the list these days.
Well, and when we hear about water management, tell us about that.
So the idea of water management is kind of cradle-to-grave, wise use of water. So, I think in the old days, we just cared once the water was on site, will it do the job for
Sure.
us? Now we're really taking a more holistic approach, where the water comes from, can that source be replenished? What's the cheapest, most economical, environmentally friendly way to get
Right.
the water to the site? Kind of new thinking. So as an example, instead of all those trucks, we're using some fit-for-purpose pipelines. So you just reel off this pipeline one time, and you've replaced hundreds of trucks driving by just flowing that water in pipeline. So it's just a win-win-win thing. Now you've got to make sure that those lines don't leak. You don't
Sure.
even want to spill fresh water anywhere. But it's a great solution. And in some areas, they think we have cut down on trucking traffic by almost 50% using those fast lines or pipelines to get water to the site. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then just continuing the water management spectrum, how do we use it? How do we use it for the job?
Right.
More importantly, how do we recycle it? How can we put it to use for the next job? So I think we're taking a far more holistic approach to making sure that we end up with something decent at the end of the process and not just consume the water.
Well, as we seem to be at the beginning of a lot of these improvements and changes, what's your prediction on things on the horizon?
Great question. Well, I feel like one of my predictions came true because a long time ago I was envisioning there's got to be a better way to move water.
Right.
And there's half a dozen vendors that have come out with kind of cool pipelines and water transfer. Another kind of fun emerging market, it seems kind of obvious, but instead of digging big storage pits, now, do you remember like during the 50s and 60s, those above ground pools?
Sure.
They were so cool, you know. They're doing that now for water storage. So you have these transportable ponds, if you will. You can set them up, fill them, and then when you break them down, there's no harm to the environment. So that's some kind of near-term stuff. I think long-term is potentially far more interesting. If you think, well, we're trying to get rid of water, well, what if we could figure out how to frack a well without water? You know, that would certainly be the holy grail. And I guarantee you all the major oilfield service companies are trying to figure out how to do that.
So you're seeing a lot of talk about methods to improve fracking.
Absolutely. And really the focus is from an environmental perspective. Also just chemistries. Now 15 states you have to disclose what chemistries you're using. So that amount of transparency, you can be sure that's going to be a stronger incentive to come out with more green, environmentally conscious chemicals for that. So let's hope that comes true.
Now, some people have commented that fracking can even cause some earthquakes or some issues. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, we talked about that hoopla last time, and it really wasn't put to bed at the time. It's a great question. So what has really come out more recently is that the concern was when you're fracking a well, that one-time job, you could be triggering an earthquake. What has come to light is that is clearly not the cause of those earthquakes. However, there's a very, very strong correlation with a few injection wells. So injection wells, you're not just putting water down at once, you're putting water down continuously to dispose of it kind of deep in the earth. So it's kind of repeat pressure. And there have been some apparently outlier injection wells where either the pressure that they could accept wasn't set right because clearly they exceeded it, or they were putting more water in than they should have. But as a result of that water going down injection wells, there's a very, very strong correlation that is indirectly or directly tied to the earthquake activity. So not so much the frack job, but getting rid of the water appears to be what's correlating with those tremors.
Few people know water better. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
And that wraps our discussion with Laura Capper. We'll be back with more right after this.
The future is here.
You can't see it. It's electric.
At NRG, we're providing clean energy and now charging stations to make the electric car a reality. Kinda makes you want a boogie woogie, doesn't it? NRG, moving clean energy forward.
It's electric.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our guest now, Cindy Boyd, CEO of CBM Enterprise Solutions. Cindy, great to have you on the program.
Hi, Paul. Nice to be here.
All right, so tell me about CBM Vision.
CBM Vision is a condition-based monitoring system for industrial equipment. We are really hoping to help eliminate failure in industrial situations.
Condition-based monitoring.
Yes.
Explain that.
You know, there has been a real shift in maintenance of equipment, and we've moved from really time-based maintenance to what is considered condition-based maintenance.
Meaning
that no longer are you doing really preventive or predictive maintenance where you walk around and inspect. You've really moved to condition maintenance. If you know the condition of a pump, motor, fan, compressor, you can then get more useful life out of that piece of equipment, or you can prevent failure by getting an early detection on anything that may be going wrong. So that's why we call it condition-based monitoring.
All right, so give us some examples of projects that you've worked on.
We have a petrochemical project going on currently. This was important to them because in the past they had actually had someone put the wrong lubricant in a pump. Small pump, a semi-critical piece of equipment, but yet 2 weeks after this, it sprang a leak. It actually caught fire, and they were very, very lucky that they were contained to about $1 million worth of damage.
Right.
Had they known prior to that, if they would have known that there was a problem in that piece of equipment, if they had had an online monitoring system, they would have started to see indications that there was a problem well before that event took place.
So you're monitoring online much of this equipment.
Yes.
Now, as CEO, where do you target?
There's absolutely a large group of industrial and manufacturing. Obviously, we're here in Houston, love Houston market and the Gulf Coast, so our first installations have been in petrochemical plants in the Gulf Coast. But we're actually working also with pipelines. Pipelines have unique challenges in that they have remote pumping stations, and some of those are unmanned as well. So it's been very well received in pipelines, refining, thousands of pieces of equipment, critical and semi-critical equipment.
What's the payback time?
The return on investment we're finding is very, very quick, particularly when you look at hazardous areas. The fewer number of man hours in very unsafe conditions really can almost pay for itself. We actually have some installations that are on very difficult to reach, difficult to maintain pieces of equipment. Well, for every time that you have to send someone out there, you may have to get a lift truck, you may have to, help them with shutting down part of the operations, et cetera, to be able to check this. Our system is easily installed and can be maintained. So in a very short period of time, you can actually have return on investment.
What does 2013 look like for you?
We're very excited about all the things that we've been working on. It looks like we will have an even larger group of customers on the Gulf Coast area, and in 2013 we are looking to expand outside of this region.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
And that wraps this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.